A student's overview of the ageless wisdom was carefully compiled from the following books by Alice A. Bailey. A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Esoteric Psychology, Volumes 1 and 2. Esoteric Healing. Esoteric Astrology. The Rays and the Initiations. Students are encouraged to download the free PDF version of this overview by following the link in the video's description, or to order a printed copy at cost from thebookpatch.com, but are advised to read the original, unabridged books in order to gain deeper insight into the ageless wisdom. Students are also invited to join our online study group at facebook.com/groups/students of the ageless wisdom. Chapter 71: The Rays and the Initiations. Advanced humanity is in process of linking the three lower aspects, which we call the personality, with the soul itself, through meditation, discipline, service and directed attention. When this has been accomplished, a definite relation is established between the sacrifice or will petals of the egoic lotus and the head and heart centers, thus producing a synthesis between consciousness, the soul and the life principle. The process of establishing this interlinking and interrelation, and the strengthening of the bridge thus constructed, goes on until the third initiation. The lines of force are then so interrelated that the soul and its mechanism of expression are a unity. A higher blending and fusing can then go on. I can perhaps indicate the nature of this process in the following manner. I have stated here and elsewhere that the soul anchors itself in the body at 2 points. 1. There is a thread of energy, which we call the life or spirit aspect, anchored in the heart. It uses the blood stream, as is well known, as its distributing agency, and through the medium of the blood, life energy is carried to every part of the mechanism. This life energy carries the regenerating power and coordinating energy to all the physical organisms and keeps the body whole. 2. There is a thread of energy, which we call the consciousness aspect or the faculty of soul knowledge, anchored in the center of the head. It controls that response mechanism which we call the brain, and through its medium it directs activity and induces awareness throughout the body by means of the nervous system. These two energy factors, which are recognized by the human being as knowledge and life, or as intelligence and living energy, are the two poles of his being. The task ahead of him now is to develop consciously the middle or balancing aspect, which is love or group relationship. The bridge between the three aspects of the mind. There is one point which I would like to clarify if I can, for on this point there is much confusion in the minds of aspirants, and this is necessarily so. Let us for a moment, therefore, consider just where the aspirant stands when he starts consciously to build the antakarana. Behind him lie a long series of existences, the experience of which has brought him to the point where he is able consciously to assess his condition and arrive at some understanding of his point in evolution. He can consequently undertake, in cooperation with his steadily awakening and focusing consciousness, to take the next step, which is that of accepted discipleship. In the present, he is oriented towards the soul. He, through meditation and the mystical experience, does have occasional contact with the soul, and this happens with increasing frequency. He is becoming somewhat creative upon the physical plane, both in his thinking and in his actions. At times, even if rarely, he has a genuine intuitive experience. This intuitive experience serves to anchor the first tenuous thread spun by the weaver in Phohatic enterprise, as the old commentary puts it. It is the first cable, projected from the spiritual triad in response to the emanation of the personality, and this is the result of the growing magnetic potency of both these aspects of the monad in manifestation. When the personality is becoming adequately magnetized from the spiritual angle, its note or sound will go forth and will evoke response from the soul on its own plane. Later the personality note and the soul note in unison will produce a definitely attractive effect upon the spiritual triad. This spiritual triad in its turn has been exerting an increasingly magnetic effect upon the personality. This begins at the time of the first conscious soul contact. The response of the triad is transmitted necessarily, in this early stage, via the sutratma and produces inevitably the awakening of the head center. That is why the heart doctrine begins to supersede the doctrine of the eye. The heart doctrine governs occult development, the eye doctrine, which is the doctrine of the eye of vision, governs the mystical experience. The heart doctrine is based upon the universal nature of the soul, conditioned by the monad, the one, and involves reality. The eye doctrine is based on the dual relation between soul and personality. It involves the spiritual relationships, but the attitude of dualism or of the recognition of the polar opposites is implicit in it. These are important points to remember as this new science becomes more widely known. The aspirant eventually arrives at the point where the three threads, of life, of consciousness and of creativity, are being focused, recognized as energy streams, and utilized deliberately by the aspiring disciple upon the lower mental plane. There, esoterically speaking, he takes his stand, and looking upward sees a promised land of beauty, love and future vision. End of page 361. There exists a gap in consciousness, though not in fact. The sutratmic strand of energy bridges the gap, and tenuously relates monad, soul and personality. But the consciousness thread extends only from soul to personality, from the involutionary sense. From the evolutionary angle, using a paradoxical phrase, there is only a very little conscious awareness existing between the soul and the personality, from the standpoint of the personality upon the evolutionary arc of the path of return. A man's whole effort is to become aware of the soul and to transmute his consciousness into that of the soul, whilst still preserving the consciousness of the personality. As the fusion of soul and personality is strengthened, the creative thread becomes increasingly active, and thus the three threads steadily fuse, blend, become dominant, and the aspirant is then ready to bridge the gap and unite the spiritual triad and the personality, through the medium of the soul. This involves a direct effort at divine creative work. The clue to understanding lies perhaps in the thought that hitherto the relation between soul and personality has been steadily carried forward, primarily by the soul, as it stimulated the personality to effort, vision and expansion. Now, at this stage, the integrated, rapidly developing personality becomes consciously active, and, in unison with the soul, starts building the antakarana, a fusion of the three threads and a projection of them into the higher wider reaches of the mental plane, until the abstract mind and the lower concrete mind are related by the triple cable. It is to this process that our studies are related. Earlier experience in relation to the three threads is logically regarded as having occurred normally. The man now stands, holding the mind steady in the light. He has some knowledge of meditation, much devotion, and also recognition of the next step. Knowledge of process gradually becomes clearer, a growing soul contact is established, occasional flashes of intuitive perception from the triad occur. All these recognitions are not present in the case of every disciple, some are present, some are not. I am seeking to give a general picture. Individual application and future realization have to be worked out by the disciple in the crucible of experience. The goal towards which the average disciple has worked in the past has been soul contact, leading eventually to what has been called hierarchical inclusion. The reward of the disciple's effort has been admittance into the ashram of some master, increased opportunity to serve in the world, and also the taking of certain initiations. The goal towards which higher disciples are working involves not only soul contact as its primary objective, for that has to some measure been attained, but the building of the bridge from the personality to the spiritual triad, with consequent monadic realization and the opening up to the initiate of the way to the higher evolution in its various branches and with its differing goals and objectives. The distinction, I said not difference and would have you note this, between the two ways can be seen in the following listed comparisons. Desire mind, karma manas. Desire, aspiration mind, projection. The first and second initiations, the third and fourth initiations. Universal love and intuition, universal will and mind. The path of light, the way of the higher evolution. The point of contact, the antakarana or bridge. The plan, the purpose. The three layers of the egoic petals, the spiritual triad. The hierarchy, Shambhala. The master's ashram, the council chamber. The seven paths, the seven paths. In reality, you have here the two major approaches to God or to the divine whole, both merging at the time of the fifth initiation in the one way, which in itself combines all ways. Forget not a statement which I have several times made, that the four minor rays must merge eventually into the third ray, and that all five must then finally merge into the second and the first rays. Bear also in mind that all these rays or modes of being are aspects or sub-rays of the second cosmic ray of love and of fire. End of page 362. I would like here also to point out some further relationships. You know well that upon the mental plane the three aspects of mind, or the three focal points of mental perception and activity, are to be found. 1. The lower concrete mind. This expresses itself most completely through the fifth ray of concrete science, reflecting the lower phase of the will aspect of divinity and summarizing within itself all knowledge as well as the egoic memory. This lower concrete mind is related to the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus and is capable of pronounced soul illumination, proving eventually to be the searchlight of the soul. It can be brought under control through the processes of concentration. It is transient in time and space. Through conscious, creative work, it can be related to the manasic permanent atom or to the abstract mind. 2. The sun of mind. This is the soul itself, governed by the second aspect of all the seven rays, a point I would ask you seriously to register. It reflects the lower phase of the love aspect of divinity and summarizes in itself the results of all accumulated knowledge, which is wisdom, illuminated by the light of the intuition. Another way of expressing this is to describe it as love, availing itself of experience and knowledge. It expresses itself most fully through the love petals of its innate being. Through dedicated and devoted service it brings the divine plan into activity in the three worlds of human accomplishment. It is therefore related to the second aspect of the spiritual triad and is brought into functioning activity through meditation. It then controls and utilizes for its own spiritual ends the consecrated personality, via the illumined mind, referred to above. It is eternal in time and space. 3. The abstract mind. This reveals itself most completely under the influence of the first ray of will or power, reflecting the higher aspect of the will of divinity or of the atmic principles. It summarizes in itself when fully developed the purpose of deity, and thus becomes responsible for the emergence of the plan. It energizes the will petals until such time as the eternal life of the soul is absorbed into that which is neither transient nor eternal but which is endless, boundless and unknown. It is brought into conscious functioning through the building of the Antakarana. This radiant rainbow bridge unites the illumined personality, focused in the mind-body, motivated by the love of the soul, with the monad or with the one life, and thus enables the divine manifesting Son of God to express the significance of the words, God is love and God is a consuming fire. This fire, energized by love, has burnt out all personality qualities, leaving only a purified instrument, colored by the soul ray and no longer necessitating the existence of a soul body. The personality has by this time completely absorbed the soul, or to put it perhaps more accurately, both soul and personality have been fused and blended into one instrument for the use of the one life. The point which I seek to emphasize is that only when the aspirant takes his stand with definiteness upon the mental plane, and keeps his focus of awareness increasingly there, does it become possible for him to make real progress in the work of divine bridge building, the work of invocation, and the establishing of a conscious rapport between the triad, the soul and the personality. The period covered by the conscious building of the Antakarana is that from the final stages of the path of probation to the third initiation. In considering this process, it is necessary, in the early stages, to recognize the three aspects of the mind as they express themselves upon the mental plane and produce the varying states of consciousness upon that plane. It is interesting here to note that, having reached the developed human stage, integrated, aspiring, oriented and devoted, the man stands firmly upon the lower levels of that mental plane. He is then faced by the 7 subplanes of that plane with their corresponding states of consciousness. He is therefore entering upon a new cycle where, this time equipped with full self-consciousness, he has 7 states of mental awareness to develop. These are all innate or inherent in him, and all, when mastered, lead to one or other of the 7 major initiations. End of page 363. The 7 states of consciousness are, beginning from the first or lowest. Mental plane. 1. Lower mental awareness. The development of true mental perception. 2. Soul awareness or soul perception. This is not the perception of the soul by the personality, but the registering of that which the soul perceives by the soul itself. This is later registered by the lower mind. This soul perception is, therefore, the reversal of the usual attitude of mind. 3. Higher abstract awareness. The unfoldment of the intuition and the recognition of intuitive process by the lower mind. Buddhic plane. 4. Persistent, conscious, spiritual awareness. This is the full consciousness of the Buddhic or intuitional level. This is the perceptive consciousness which is the outstanding characteristic of the hierarchy. The life focus of the man shifts to the Buddhic plane. This is the fourth or middle state of consciousness. Atmic plane. 5. The consciousness of the spiritual will as it is expressed and experienced upon atmic levels or upon the third plane of divine manifestation. There is little that I can say about this condition of awareness. Its state of nirvanic awareness can mean but little to the average disciple. Monadic plane. 6. The inclusive awareness of the monad upon its own plane, the second plane of our planetary and solar life. Logoic plane. 7. Divine consciousness. This is the awareness of the whole on the highest plane of our planetary manifestation. This is also an aspect of solar awareness upon the same plane. As we strive to arrive at some dim comprehension of the nature of the work to be done in building the Antakarana, it might be wise, as a preliminary step, to consider the nature of the substance out of which the bridge of shining mind stuff has to be built by the conscious aspirant. The Oriental term for this mind stuff is chitta. It exists in 3 types of substance, all basically identical but all qualified or conditioned differently. It is a fundamental law in this solar system, and therefore in our planetary life experience, that the substance through which divinity, in time and space, expresses itself is karmically conditioned. It is impregnated by those qualities and aspects which are the product of earlier manifestations of that being in whom we live and move and have our being. This is the basic fact lying behind the expression of that trinity or triad of aspects with which all the world religions have made us familiar. This trinity is as follows. 1. The Father aspect. This is the underlying plan of God. Will, the essential cause of being. Purpose, life purpose, motivating evolution. The note of synthetic sound. Utilizes the Sutratma. 2. The Sun aspect. The quality of sensitivity. Love, the nature of relationship. Wisdom, the method of evolution. Consciousness /soul, the note of attractive sound. Utilizes the consciousness thread. 3. The Mother aspect. The intelligence of substance. Intelligence, the nature of form. The Holy Spirit response to evolution. The note of nature. Develops the creative thread. End of page 364. The mental plane which must be bridged is like a great stream of consciousness or of conscious substance, and across this stream the Antakarana must be constructed. This is the concept which lies behind this teaching and behind the symbolism of the path. Before a man can tread the path, he must become that path himself. Out of the substance of his own life he must construct this rainbow bridge, this lighted way. He spins it and anchors it as a spider spins a thread along which it can travel. Each of his 3 divine aspects contributes to that bridge, and the time of this building is indicated when his lower nature is 1. Becoming oriented, regulated and creative. 2. Recognizing and reacting to soul contact and control. 3. sensitive to the first impression of the monad. This sensitivity is indicated where there is a submission to the will of God or of the greater whole, b unfoldment of the inner spiritual will, overcoming all obstacles, c cooperation with the purpose of the hierarchy, the interpreting will of God as expressed in love. I have enumerated these three responses to the totality of the divine aspects because they are related to the antakarana and must become defined and conditioned upon the mental plane. They are there to be found expressing themselves in substance. 4. The lower concrete mind. The receptive common sense. The highest aspect of the form nature. The reflection of Atma, the spiritual will. The throat center. Knowledge. 5. The individualized mind. The soul or spiritual ego. The middle principle. Buddhimanas. The reflection in mental substance of the monad. Spiritual love wisdom. The heart center. Love. 6. The higher abstract mind. The transmitter of Buddhi. The reflection of the divine nature. Intuitive love, understanding, inclusiveness. The head center. Sacrifice. There are necessarily other arrangements of these aspects in manifestation, but the above will serve to indicate the relation of monad soul personality as they express themselves through certain focused stations or points of power upon the mental plane. In humanity, however, the major realization to be grasped at the present point in human evolution is the need to relate, consciously and effectively, the spiritual triad, the soul on its own plane and the personality in its threefold nature. This is done through the creative work of the personality, the magnetic power of the triad, and the conscious activity of the soul, utilizing the triple thread. You can see, therefore, why so much emphasis is laid by esotericists upon fusion, unity or blending. Only when this is intelligently realized can the disciple begin to weave the threads into a bridge of light which eventually becomes the lighted way across which he can pass into the higher worlds of being. Thus he liberates himself from the three worlds. It is, in this world cycle, preeminently a question of fusion and expressing, in full waking awareness, three major states of consciousness. 1. The Shambhala consciousness. Awareness of the unity and purpose of life. Recognition and cooperation with the plan. Will. Direction. Oneness. The influence of the triad. 2. The hierarchical consciousness. Awareness of the self, the soul. Recognition and cooperation with divinity. Love. Attraction. Relation. The influence of the soul. 3. The human consciousness. Awareness of the soul within the form. Recognition and cooperation with the soul. Intelligence. Action. Expression. The influence of the consecrated personality. The man who finally builds the antakarana across the mental plane connects or relates these three divine aspects, so that progressively at each initiation they are more closely fused into one divine expression in full and radiant manifestation. Putting it in other words, the disciple treads the path of return, builds the antakarana, crosses the lighted way, and achieves the freedom of the path of life. End of page 365. End of chapter 71.